All right, good evening, folks. Thank you for those in attendance, and if you're online, we appreciate your time this evening as well. We will record this presentation this evening and post it out on our social media platforms for other people to provide an opportunity for them to hear the presentation, as well as an opportunity for them to provide some comments and feedback as we wrap up this process. We started this process back in January, meeting with our architect team, with staff, and then in February we held our first kickoff meeting with the public at that point in time, and provided feedback on the initial plans. During February through May, we all experienced a little blip in society here as COVID-19 appeared and kind of changed some of the methods that we had to use in our process. We had always planned a second meeting sometime in April. We did push that back into May. That meeting was an online only meeting, and we provided the opportunity for people to give us feedback and input based upon that. Between February and May, we did have two surveys. One was a mailed survey that was a statistically valid survey. It was randomly selected to the community. We didn't control who it went to. The firm, ETC, they used their own system as far as to determine randomly who received those and who didn't. That provided about 500 returns, and Kelly will get into that a little bit more as we kind of get through that process. And then we had a SurveyMonkey survey that we provided people to comment on, and that's part of Kelly's presentation again this evening. Where we're at today is July. This is our last public input process. What you're going to see tonight is pretty much a finalized plan. Other than if we do receive comments, we'll be tweaking some of the plans, but certainly looking to make sure that the plan is meeting the intent of what the community has told us through the surveys and the public meetings that we've held to date. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Van Elders with Stantec, and he will introduce the rest of his team. And appreciate your time this evening.
Thanks, Dennis. We appreciate everybody joining us in whatever format you are joining us on this presentation. We want to thank Dennis and the advisory committee and the city of Blue Springs for trusting us with these two incredible pieces of property. It's not very often you get to have two greenfield projects and get to, take them from where they were, a raw piece of ground, and turn them into a fast, real fun park for the public to use. So we just really thank you guys for trusting us with that. We've had a great time with it. Along with me today in the presentation, you'll be hearing from Josh Cheek, Senior Landscape Architect with Stantec, and Brian Garvey, who is the Principal with SFS Architects, who's our architects on the project. We have other consultants. Wilson and Company is our civil engineer for the project. And we also had Ballard King, who is helping us with operations and maintenance. This is an illustration of the locations for the two parks. They're both on the south end of the city limits. Southwest Park is adjacent to the Bridger urban area, heavily wooded site. There is some open agricultural area for about 40% of the property, but most of it that abuts along the Bridger urban area is a forested area. The road that you would enter the park is on Wyatt Road. Then on the other side of Highway 7, on the east side, is Roscoe Ryder Park, just a little bit further to the south off of Colburn Road. It's a 75-acre park as opposed to Southwest, which was a 50-acre park. And it is primarily just a wide open agricultural field as a current use. And it's adjacent to some single-family subdivisions, an elementary school, and some large lot residential as well. First thing I want to do is just really review the community engagement survey. We have had quite a presence online with our public surveys. Our consultants did a great job of gathering input. As Dennis said, we had over 500 people participate, which makes it a valid survey for this particular population. Of that, we got comments from 191 respondents, and that's pretty good generation. Tells us there's a lot of interest in parks and recreation and aquatics for City of Blue Springs. We collected that data in March and April of this year, and of that we had 32 questions that related to both parks and aquatics. This gives us a 95% level of confidence for the number of response that we have, that we really nailed what people wanted in these parks. I also wanted to make sure that everybody is aware that we also utilized the master plan that was recently completed in 2016 for the City of Blue Springs. That's a citywide master plan that also had a survey and a lot of public involvement in gathering of information. So we used that information as well and what respondents wanted for these two specific parks. So that's where a lot of our design ideas and the uses that we're going to review with you today, that's the source of all of that, as well as the public meetings that we had, including the review we're having today. So you look at public respondents, we had 56% of them that use passive parks outside the city. That tells us that there's a lot of need within the city limits that the city is not able to meet with their current parks. So again, that's another source that we use to say, you know, what are the things that we need to do in these two parks to meet those needs, so they don't have to go outside the city for those uses. And as you can see on the right-hand side is why are people visiting parks, whether it be City of Blue Springs Park or other. Majority of people use walking trails, so you're going to see a lot of walking trails in both of these parks. Nature areas are the next important thing, just a place to relax, which of course became even more predominant since really February of this year. Playgrounds, huge interest, and then shelter and picnic areas. So that's where a lot of our respondents have, you know, focused a lot of what they wanted to see. So you'll see that in our designs as we present those to you later. A lot of the 87% of respondents say that families are the most important group for the park design. So you will again see that the uses that we're proposing are very family centric. Okay, so 53% of the residents who indicate that the city parks mostly meet their needs. So just a little over half, 52% said they would use a new park weekly if it had the following 5 amenities. So paved walking paths, nature paths, picnic shelters, picnic facilities, festivals and fairs, and as well as playgrounds. So with that information, we have the following design for Southwest Park. What we're going to do is Josh Cheek is going to take us through the design of this, and as well as Brian. And then at the before we proceed on to Roscoe, Ryder, we'll just see if there's been any questions online that we'll need to address before moving on to that part. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh, who will describe briefly our existing conditions and then get into the design of the park. Thanks, Josh.
All right, thanks, Kelly. We're going to spend a little bit of time discussing these parks, and we just wanted to kind of briefly comment on just how excited we are to share these with the city and with the public, and hopefully after the presentation, there's an excitement level of just the potential that each one of these parks has for the city as a whole. So first one is Southwest, and as Kelly mentioned, its location adjacent to the Bridger Urban, and that's pretty significant in just the Missouri Department of Conservation and the opportunity to work hand in hand with them to create a new park that really has a unique identity, really fits in well with the existing topography and the existing landscape that exists. And not only as it relates to Bridger Urban, but potential to connect to Lake Jacomo and areas beyond. So spending some time on site, it's one of those places where you just can't spend enough time out on site. It's beautiful. There's a lot of existing tree cover, as we mentioned, kind of this great mix with tree lines in that space in between kind of where the existing agriculture is and the trees. but also these waterways that come through are pretty great. And as you spend a lot of time around the metro and you understand kind of the system of channelization and how water kind of moves through, especially storm water, in a lot of spaces you'll see a really great elevation difference between the water level of the stream corridor and then adjacent land. And there's a great opportunity at Southwest to really make this connection between the adjacent property and the adjacent land and that landscape, and how that can be utilized in correlation with that stream corridor. So this is kind of a higher level view of the park, and we'll dive into each one of these spaces in more detail. We just wanted to kind of some overall kind of connectivity issues and kind of talk some of that. So understanding Wyatt Roads to the south, making a connection off of that. And we really wanted this to be a park-like drive. We didn't want this to be a direct connection that was this north-south vehicle mover. We really wanted to utilize some of the topography, utilize the alignment of this road to really start to create some dramatic vistas and some views throughout the park, as well as making sure that we are consolidating as much pedestrian space as possible. So just the notion that there's not a road that's cutting through, we're really starting to maximize the potential green space and the opportunity for people to utilize that without having to cross a vehicular way. Noting that there's a future fire station potential in this location, understanding the neighborhood to the north and just the importance of that connection. And then again, the connection to Bridger Urban and the possibilities that exist just with working with Missouri Department of Conservation. So like I said, we'll dive into these areas in a little more detail. I think the importance of this graphic is just the understanding of how we're really starting to fit the open space in with some of the existing tree cover, starting to maximize some of those spaces as well. You'll see we'll start to cite specific elements and specific uses and how those relate to just some of the existing natural systems that occur on site. A little axon aerial view kind of shows that, and maybe a little easier to read. These will be online, so we'll post these online where people can really dive into these and really start to explore them as much as possible. But again, I think the thing that we're really excited about with this park is just the flowing nature of the green space and how it really is fitting in well with the existing land. So starting at the south. This is the south arrival, south gateway off of Wyatt Road. I'm looking at potential for a parking node in that location, an opportunity for people to come in, park, jump on this trail system, looking at really exploring the opportunity for trails in the tree line, looking at making sure that we are providing those paved areas for people to walk, but also those more exploratory trails as well, where people can really jump on a trail, single track, really get into the tree line and really do some real exploring. Shelter in this location, potential to really have a gathering spot that's kind of nestled into the tree line here. And then one of the things that we've been exploring more lately is how can you create kind of dynamic landscape environments that allow people to not tell them how to play, but they can find ways to kind of make new play opportunities. So that's what we're looking in this area. And it's the notion of this flexible lawn, sculpted earthen berm, similar to what's in this picture. So kids can slide down it, they can kick a ball, make new games, just really have an opportunity for some more kind of unique play. But in the winter, this could be a great sled hill, you know, looking at that parking that's close to it, north facing, so that we can get as much snow cover to remain as much as possible. And then just that opportunity to have that sled hill space is pretty exciting. Just to the north of that, we're looking at that existing creek, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail later, but just how that becomes an edge for this, this space. Moving to the north a little bit, you can kind of see how these forms start to relate to one another. looking at an opportunity for an identity pedestrian bridge in this location. You know, something similar where people can have that Instagram moment, really looking at, again, enhancing this existing creek with a series of waterfalls and pools. We were out there in winter. There was still running water, which is a great sign and a great opportunity to provide some experiences like this that wouldn't be too difficult to achieve. So along with this pedestrian space as well, looking at opportunities for kind of those fun crossing moments where people are really getting engaged at water level. And then again, looking at, is there potential that we could have some pooling areas, so the smaller waterfalls, maybe backing up a little water in this area, so you have opportunity for this shelter to have this great relationship between this body of water. A little further to the north, we get into this event celebration facility. So looking at the opportunity to take this great moment on site and this kind of tucked in glove that's created with this clearing and these trees, and create a spot where people can really have an opportunity to rent a facility for a wedding, for a corporate event, birthdays, family reunions, maybe looking at potential for restaurants to come in and rent out the event barn and have, you know, special dinners, but just really a really unique, flexible space that provides an opportunity to create memories, and kind of setting that up to where it becomes this unique node and this special moment within the park. You know, we're also looking at those moments of getting down into the trees. So not only having that opportunity to have an event up at here, but is there a connecting opportunity to have it down in the tree line for these really kind of, you know, fun, magical kind of events that could happen down in the tree line adjacent to the water. Again, here's a little perspective of what that could look like, making sure that we're understanding the need for a drop-off, this arrival moment gardens into the space, so that's this real processional, this arrival sequence as you arrive into the space. Getting it off of that road as well is pretty important. So as you're in the space, you're kind of getting blocked and you're getting screened from kind of the major activity of the park. And also understanding that if an event's going on here, we want to provide that opportunity for people to still utilize the park and make their way around without having to cut directly through this facility. Opportunity for a small playground adjacent to that. Just there could be some synergy between these two. If you're having a wedding and kids need to blow off some steam, it's a place for them to do that. So I'll have Brian talk a little bit about some of his ideas behind the architecture and how that fits in with the park.
All right, thanks, Josh. Well, my name's Brian. I'm a principal with SFS, as Kelly mentioned. I'm really excited to talk about the buildings and the architecture that support these two fantastic parks, starting here with Southwest Park. So as Josh mentioned, this is a fantastic opportunity of flexibility and multi-purpose type event space to support a whole variety of different types of events and things of that sort. So one change that has occurred with the design of these buildings and spaces since the last meeting or webinar that we did was we've adjusted kind of how the space is allocated in these structures here for the event space. Previously, we had kind of two buildings that were of similar size and capacity, organized around a courtyard space, but not physically connected with any type of connector there. So what we've done now is actually made the event space a little bit more purposeful and larger. So the capacity in these two bullet points are inaccurate for this presentation, and we will update those for the presentation that's sent out following this. But essentially, we've combined these buildings into one, and the total is about 13,500 square feet. And the capacity of the large event space would serve up to about 350 people in a wedding or a banquet or an event of that sort. That space is really uninterrupted and focused on that larger event type gathering. The smaller building, and we'll see that in a little bit more detail in the next slide, is going to be geared more towards smaller meetings. It has a conservatory, it has some different types of experiences and connections with nature over there in that area. So kind of wanted to point that out with the main event building, that it's more of a combined, purposeful type of event space now. Also in support of the park are a couple of other smaller structures. So we have some shelters that have generally a capacity of about 50 people. Those are the smaller ones. We have one larger shelter that'll support about 80 people, and we'll show some imagery of what those look like. And then a restroom building within the park as well that's remote from this larger building. So just a view, a rendering, kind of a bird's eye view elevated over that arrival area of the event space. So this is looking kind of southwest, I believe. There in the left side from center and to left of the image is the main event space. This is a building we see with a lot of glass, really taking advantage of those fantastic views. But interior is really pretty plain, and letting the structural expression really kind of shine through, and letting that space be decorated in any number of different ways. Off to the right side of this slide, you see kind of what's called the main house. And this would house some more smaller meeting spaces, a conservatory, the office for the events coordinator, the person that's going to oversee all these different activities and things that occur in this building, and then the kitchen space that would serve both of them. That would have a direct connection from the conservatory, which is at the far end of this building here, over into this main event space. So for instance, a wedding, you may have the bride is able to get the bridal party ready over here in the main house, and then process into the event space if there was a wedding being held in that building. If it's a reception and the wedding's held out on the property, then they still have that opportunity as well. On the far left side of the main event space, there's a little lower portion of building here that would house restrooms, a bar area, storage, and things of that sort to support the event space. This is a rendering of the large shelter. So again, this is one that serves about, or has a capacity of about 80 people, depending on how tables are arranged and the different type of event that may occur there. And this one's situated kind of on that entry drive as you sweep in, and it's tucked in kind of down by that one waterway and water feature there. So it has a deck that's kind of elevated out looking over it. The materiality here, as things are coming down to the ground, we're switching to kind of a metal structure and then going to a wood structure above where it's protected. So that would help with maintenance over the life of the structure. And then a standing seam roof and an exposed wood deck under here. So we really like the idea of these A-frame structures and that type of structure for this park because it's a much more natural setting. And these are pretty iconic kind of structures, I guess. It's unique in a park setting as well. So as you can imagine it as a wayfinding element, you know, I'll meet me by the A-frame or meet me by the big A-frame or the small A-frame over here. It's just an interesting typology to use here. A couple of more views of the small shelter on the left, and then how we translate that A-frame concept into a little restroom building so that there's some consistency among the architectural language going on. Toss back to Josh. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think it's really great to see how that synergy between the architecture and the landscape really starts to become evident as these become a little more real in the renderings. So moving just north of that, again, I think one of the important things just to note again is the notion of this 10-foot trail being this connecting spine that kind of links all of these uses together and becomes the opportunity for accessibility and for all kind of abilities to really gain access to the park. Making sure that we're probably not shown as good as it could be, but that there's a connection and making sure that we're connecting north to that neighborhood as well. So this is kind of the north portion of the site before it drops off to that waterway, and really looking at this to have a play structure element that really starts to tie into the tree line. There's a great kind of ridge that occurs right along here before the slope really drops off. And it's just the opportunity of having a play structure that starts to feel like you're in the trees, and then having the ability to connect that into the actual tree line is really exciting. And it's kind of the found opportunity on site, just working with the existing topography, understanding that a lot of times you're looking at these structures and finding a way of getting up into the structures, and that can be a challenge for accessibility. But because of the topography of the site, we can come directly off of this and create this tree walk experience that really gets you up in the trees without having to make that vertical move from ground level up to that elevated platform. So something similar to this, where we have this notion of this walkway that becomes elevated in the trees, I think is a really great place to have a site narrative here that can evolve through seasons. So there could be a spring walk, maybe there's a Halloween walk. Obviously the holiday light walk would be fabulous. And just looking at a way that really encourages people to come back to the site and experience the same structure and the same walk, but in a completely different way, is something that we're really excited about, the notion of that and how that could really fit into the park usage. So the blue line you can see here is the idea of a ground level, having some single track bike trails. They could be hiking trails as well, but just the idea of this kind of interconnectivity between that upper tree walk and then these trails that are going below, and just how that can be a really dynamic place where people can be walking up on a kind of a much more passive environment, and then having that much more kind of adventure course underneath could be pretty cool. Along with the play structure, we're looking at the opportunity to include a small pump track, and this is really that space to learn. So as new bikers are starting to get accustomed to some of the movement and the fluidity of biking, they can kind of practice on here before they kind of jump into those trails. So an exciting opportunity for kind of that learn, grow, and then experience. And then with the idea of potentially connecting this to a larger bike system that would potentially go over to Lake Tacoma would be pretty exciting. And then a little further to the north, you can see that connection up to the neighborhood. There's an existing lift station on site, and then the opportunity to kind of cross this water kind of in some different ways, looking at some built elements as well, making sure that we're providing those opportunities for people to get on site when maybe just after a rain, so that there's an ability to get out there and get on the trail while things are drying out. And again, those kind of moments of passive use as well are really important to find. So that is Southwest Park. If anyone has any questions or comments, this would be a good time to kind of take those.
I know I haven't talked to you for a
sure.
second, but I want to put it out there for everybody else. A property like that would be really cool for a disc golf course. I take care of the one that's at Wilbur Young Park. The Kansas City disc golf community is huge. It's one of the best in the nation for sure. It could potentially bring, big pro tournaments and all that kind of stuff, as well as that survey said they're looking at family structure. I've been playing my son since he could walk. So in the woods and I talked to you a little bit about the elevation and all the woods. I think that'd be really cool. So I just want to put that out there to everybody, kind of maybe think about that, or down the road or now, whatever. But I would definitely like to get that in there.
Yeah, we'll definitely look at it as a consideration. It's definitely one of those things that can layer it on. We haven't heard about it yet, kind of in the process. So, but it's something that we can definitely explore as a potential opportunity.
Yeah.
Moving forward. Okay. Anything else? Online, is there anything? Put that as a no. Okay. All right. We'll move on to Roscoe, Ryder. So moving a little bit to the south, a little bit to the east, just the adjacency of this parcel of land to some of the existing. There's a elementary school in this location, some bigger residential lots to the north and the east, and then a neighborhood that's to the west as well. A couple high points on site. This is a much different character as we get into the images. You'll definitely see a lot, primarily agricultural land. There's a couple existing tree lines that we'll look at and look at opportunities to embrace those as well. Tower on site, and then another lift station. So moving to the images, you can just see the character just being completely different, much more open, longer views instead of those kind of shorter views. So looking at opportunities to kind of have that longer vista across the park, and we'll see those in some of the concepts as we move forward. Here's that tower. You can see the large amount of agricultural land, some existing tree, but just the erosion that's currently occurring just because of the lack of vegetative cover that's currently on site. So this park we took a much more active approach to, kind of in a counterpoint to the more native, more passive areas of Southwest Park. And one of the key things that this looked at was circulation through the site. And similar to Southwest Park, looking at that opportunity to allow people to move through the park, but it's not that direct connection. There's an existing right-of-way on the north side, so looking at that opportunity to connect to the north with 2 points of entry into the site, and then a road that really swings around, kind of gets you up on that high point so you can kind of views across, and then kind of snakes back around and get you down to the south. One of the key things on this one was looking at that opportunity for that larger festival fair green to occur. So a larger piece of open space was kind of dedicated to that, looking at really giving it a prime spot in the park from the terms of topography, as well as just the geometry and the orientation and how it aligns. We kind of like the idea of this existing tree mass cutting into this geometry as just kind of a way to kind of break that up. Great spot for people to kind of engage in a different way, and we'll kind of talk about that as we move forward. This being the primary activity node of the park, and then a larger landscape statement on this east side, and we'll talk about that in more detail. You can kind of see how this starts to set up. One of the things that we really wanted to look at was there an opportunity to have this bigger festival green that could be blocked off from vehicular traffic. So really designing the circulation, the vehicular circulation and the pedestrian circulation to allow those spots for traffic control on the south side and the north side, and really having this just be this pedestrian festival area could be pretty great. You kind of see this landscape statement. We're terming it the field of flowers in the background, and again looking at that opportunity to be on that high point, and then another high point over here, and just kind of the way the land sets up is a pretty dramatic kind of palette that we can utilize to really make something special back there. So again, starting at the south, looking at that park drive, how it starts to move into the park, making sure that we're providing for pedestrian opportunity along that as well. This was really one of the best level areas on the site, and we really looked at this as an opportunity for a couple things. One would be just impromptu field sports, so just the notion of someone having a pickup game, a soccer pitch fits in pretty great right here. But also looking at it as festivals could grow, this could be a great overflow parking area as well. Making sure that we're allowing for those connections into the school, working with their existing system, and making sure that we're providing students the opportunity to connect to some of the surrounding neighborhoods, and really using the park as a way to get to school and move through. Again, the larger green area really setting up on axis with this arrival plaza, opportunity for a stage in this location. There's a subtle grade that occurs here, so looking at sculpting the land to really set up this, not a really strong, strict, steep amphitheater, but just more of a gentle slope that allows this to kind of set up in a way that makes sense but when this is not here, it doesn't look like anything is missing. Shared use path that goes around, looking at native grass and using that as a transition between the open lawn and the native grass as a maintenance kind of edge for that. Parking on the north and south sides, so we're showing this being that main arrival plaza into the area, making sure we're having that direct relationship between the architecture and these kind of active areas. And this would be a great kind of indication of what this could be with that native grass mix with that kind of shared use path and then the turf beyond. So the active kind of zone, a lot of labels in here. So we kind of talk through some of the ideas that we've kind of been working around and trying to create this as a really node for a lot of things to come together, kind of in this synergy that could occur is pretty, could be something really special for the city. So indoor and outdoor pickleball located on the north side of this building with cafe and meeting rooms, and Brian can talk a little bit more about kind of the architecture and how those kind of fit together. But just the notion that those kind of have this view over this festival plaza, this water feature that could be interactive. Maybe there's jets of water. Maybe it's a more passive area that has texture in the bottom of the basin with lights that could pop on and off. To create kind of this interesting arrival into the festival area. This is what we're terming the multi-season loop. So in the winter, this could be ice skating. In the summer, this could be an inline skating track. It could be an opportunity to provide some more pop jets with some lights and a really kind of dynamic kind of water experience as you kind of make your way around this area. This island and this area over just to the south and west, looking at rock climbing with a pedestrian bridge as a way to kind of activate this inner area. Looking at shelters kind of scattered around the site, giving people the opportunity to have gatherings and have shade. An adventure course and play structure kind of on the north side, looking at the adventure course as a way to get into this tree line as well, with the opportunity for some ropes, some ninja style course kind of activities as well for an older demographic. But this really being the identity play structure that is on axis with this cafe meeting room and that place that becomes a real iconic element for the city and the park. Place for a smaller performance as well, understanding the bigger festivals could occur here, but is there an opportunity for a smaller band to set up a speaker, a small performance in this area that kind of relates to that cafe and meeting rooms. Existing tower, and then as we move through to those shared use paths and that notion of making sure that we have pedestrian connectivity throughout. So one of the things that we really wanted to look at with this was that summer and winter activity of something that's kind of traditionally only seen as a one season use. And we really wanted to kind of explore, the opportunities to engage. So as I mentioned before, this pedestrian water experience in the summer could be something that is really unique for the metro and for the region as well, and this place that people are really drawn to for the visual and then the experience of walking through that, both at daytime and the evening as well. And the opportunity to use some of these boulders for lights could be really special. Looking at fire as well as a way of gathering people at this trailhead, looking at the opportunity. Maybe there's a spot there where we can really have a node that becomes, your marshmallow pit. Up to the north here, potentially another spot that really is on axis with that. Maybe this is water in the summer and fire in the winter as a way of just kind of activating that during the different seasons. But you can see as it transitions to the winter, there's this notion of similar uses, but they're just evolving to meet the season. So the ice ribbon and the way that people can move around that. The warming hut that in the summer is the cooling hut, and for misting, this becomes a warming hut with restrooms potentially. And again, those fire pits really becoming those moments of gathering around there as well. Someone pass it off to Brian here to talk a little bit about the architecture.
Okay, thanks, Josh. This one is a pretty exciting park as well. As you can see, it's kind of a stark contrast to Southwest Park, and being a little bit more opportunity here for some contemporary structures and a little less about kind of that traditional or natural type of feel here, but still need to be very integrated into this park setting and complement the landscape architecture and the activities that it supports. So starting with kind of the main building on the site here, the activity center. This building is going to support a lot of different types of things, namely indoor and outdoor pickleball. So if anyone's been to Chicken and Pickle, it's kind of a similar type of setup and a similar number of courts to what they have in North KC. It also needs to have kind of the ability to support those courts and support the plaza area in the multi-season loop, and all of these other activities with another opportunity to generate some revenue. And that being a cafe or a bar area that could support a limited number of food service. Maybe it's a full-blown commercial kitchen, maybe it's a little smaller, but definitely having drink service and outdoor seating is a way to do that. Skate rental, meeting rooms, things of that sort would also be contained in the activity building. Josh mentioned there's shelters and some restroom areas around the site. We do have a larger shelter up to 80 again, and the 4 smaller shelters serving about 50. So similar to Southwest Park in the area of capacities there. This is a view of that activity building. This is from kind of the multi-season loop, or just to the west of the multi-season loop, over those pond areas or those pools that Josh was talking about, and looking back toward the west. So in this view, you can kind of see the cafe area there on the right side of the building. We kind of picked up on that existing tower in the park and kind of dubbed this the Cell Tower Cafe. So just maybe start thinking about how the site and the native features to it, or the existing features of the site, start to impact the building and breathe a little life and character into that. You can see the roof deck above there, where you'd have an elevated view looking out over that multi-season loop. So you can imagine this being just a fantastic place to be on the roof there and having coffee or cocktails, depending on the time of day, looking down over that area. That large piece in the middle there, that's where we get into some of the more meeting room type spaces. So there are meeting rooms on the lower level within that space and meeting rooms on the upper level. That space is the connector for all the pieces in this building. So it would link you to the pickleball, it would bring you into the cafe, and that's how you would enter the cafe, and then the meeting rooms would be accessed off of that circulation area as well. Those meeting rooms can serve about 75 to 100 people, depending on how they're set up, and they could be divided, so you could have smaller rooms created similar to this room that we're meeting in here, with some operable partitions to create a different meeting environment. We have park restrooms that are over there on the far left, so those are kind of behind that festival plaza, or just east of that festival plaza, but could be accessed by anybody that's using the park. So a lot of diversity and activity in how this building will support this project. I think it's important to point out with this building and with the event space building, kind of the 2 major architectural pieces within these parks, the importance that they are driving revenue into the Parks and Recreation Department to make both of these projects eventually self-sustainable financially, and that's really a goal with these 2 buildings. So that's why we include things like a cafe or a bar or a kitchen, meeting rooms that would be rentable, at the event space, a space that's set up well for larger types of receptions and events and things like that. And again, to drive revenue to support the financial sustainability of these 2 parks and of the Parks and Recreation Department. A quick view of one of the shelters, obviously much more understated shelter design at Roscoe Ryder Park, where the building is a much more iconic type of structure. These smaller structures are intended to be very subdued, but as they're situated within the landscape, we actually take the idea of taking a piece of the landscaping and putting it up onto the roof and maybe those are different types of plants or they're different colors of wildflowers in the meadow or whatever that could be, but that could be a way to signify and create a wayfinding element with these shelters. So you may say like, meet me at the Black-Eyed Susan shelter over there, and for obvious reasons it's called the Black-Eyed Susan shelter. So it's just kind of the general idea with those shelter elements. So Josh? Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. I think there's something really great about the both the shelters at Southwest and at Roscoe. Southwest, they're much more focused views and kind of relate to kind of the organization and just the existing kind of character of the site, where here at Roscoe Ryder, they have more open views, so you're getting those longer views kind of throughout the shelter, which is pretty interesting how those both relate to each side as well. So pretty excited about those. Moving a little bit to the east, and this idea of this field of flowers, this wildflower field, that's this monoculture of a single native flower, and looking at that being really an opportunity for a really identity statement that really can signify not only for the park, but almost a point for the community as well. A place where people can come and take those selfie moments, those Instagram shots, or just the family photos as well. And looking at how those start to kind of tuck into this part of the park. Looking at this being the edge, understanding, kind of looking at that as a tree-lined edge with a native grass mix, and then that wildflower field that would kind of occur in the center of that shared use path. Locating these shelters throughout, as Brian mentioned, as kind of unique opportunities for gathering within that. A little bit to the north again, the lift station, the tower, looking at these connection points through with the shared use path, but just taking a step back. One of the things that we debated a little bit was, does there need to be a vehicular connection that occurs on this east side? And for a few reasons, we took it out. One was just to maintain kind of the integrity of kind of this natural system and eliminate, the vehicular movement through that space. But we also wanted to make sure that we were providing accessibility as well. So this parking node that's kind of pushed pretty far to the east here, and then as well as one kind of sneaking through under the trees and having a parking opportunity as well. It gets pretty close to these shelters. We're providing those opportunities for people with limited mobility to engage in these spaces as well. So again, you see the shared use path on this north side, kind of connecting through, and then over, this would be the northwest corner of the park. And this would be a location where we're looking at a dog park. So both having under trees as well as in the sun, but a really kind of special moment up here that kind of segregates it from that, a place where we could have a shelter with a restroom, looking at a parking node here as well, and then just having this shared use path come around that, so it's not really disrupting at all. So that is Roscoe Ryder Park. Love to hear any questions or comments people have. Yeah.
I have one. Just first of all, very nice job pulling all this together. This is really exciting, and you guys have done a terrific job putting all this together. So thank you for all the work that you put in there. My question though is about parking. As we expand beyond the traditional playground park, the shelter kind of concept, and move into meetings and events and festivals and all of those things, parking is always an issue no matter where you go or what you do. But do you feel like we have sufficient parking to support the level of people and activity that may come in?
We do. So basically on our preliminary parking count studies for the activities within the activity center, so the ice ring, the pickleball courts, the cafe, the playground areas, the dog park, looking at all those, we're actually a little overparked in what's shown on the graphic. And the reason for that is just understanding festivals grow and they change. And as they become more popular, there could be need to expand that. So I'm going to move back here a little bit just to kind of illustrate that. But you can kind of see we allowed the potential for parking to expand if needed, just in the arrangement of, I'm going to get to a different, make it a little closer. I'll apologize for jumping around so much. There's not a great spot that shows it. This is a good one. So as the geometry of this parking lot, we can expand this parking if needed, both along the lanes to increase those, but also increasing them to the back as well. So right now, we think what's shown here will meet the parking demands of the facility. Now, if there becomes a thing where we're having a festival out here every weekend and we need to grow, well, we can look at opportunities to grow that parking. And that's another reason that we looked at that opportunity on the south, to leave that open field kind of, you know, but don't overfill that with uses and leave that a space where overflow parking could occur directly adjacent to that. So it's a great thought, because you can, parking is one of those things that it's hard to nail the number on, but just kind of with the flexibility of the geometry of the site, we think that we have those ability to expand as well as using overflow to meet
You
those
know off
needs.
the top of your head how many parking spaces you have? You know,
I would love to know that number.
I was just.
What we'll do is we'll do a parking count number, and we'll put that online with the presentation that kind of gives a call for each lot and how many stalls are in each lot. But we're happy to do that. Sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head. I should.
Are you guys gonna be doing both parks? Like, it's not like the city picks one that they like and then you guys do it, or?
That's a great question for Dennis.
You don't have to go ahead and all attack.
No, so, I mean, it is a very complicated question. So, you know, first of all, the funding for these parks will be tied to the community wanting to pass the extension of the sales tax coming up. So currently right now, in 2017, we passed the park sales tax, which funded our deferred maintenance needs for 5 years, and that basically addressed 40% of our current parks maintenance deferred needs. With this plan, depending on what we look at, what city council decides they want to take to voters, if we were to try to do this in the manner that we're talking about, certainly we're talking about 2 parks here. We also have the aquatic study that's going on at the same time to address some of the aquatics needs. And then we also have the continued maintenance of our current park system. So I know this is a very convoluted answer. So the best answer that I have for you is probably how we would look at this is we would allocate 50% of the funding to what we would call parkland development, which would be development of parks, park facilities, aquatics facilities, those kinds of things, new ventures in our park system. And the other 50% would be for maintenance of the parks over the length of that tax, whether that's how many every years it's decided to go. So the easy answer would be is most likely we'd probably pick one park and start with that. And then depending on how that funding goes, try to start seeing if there's ways that we could develop the other park or the aquatics facility or whatever that is. But all that'll be hashed out as we get finished with these studies and as we start talking about what does the sales tax extension look like, one for length of time and what's going to be funded in that. Okay? Anything else from you guys? Well, certainly we appreciate everybody's attendance, and we will post this online. I want to apologize up front anybody that was trying to get on. We had an issue with the link early on and tried to get people on. We got that sent out, but that people may have still missed the presentation. We'll load this on our social media so people can still view this presentation, provide feedback through our social media outlets, and then we pass that feedback on to the architects as they prepare final documents to do the final presentation to City Council and the Park Commission. That should take place sometime in September or early October. And then we will continue to work through the aquatic study, which we're picking that back up here in the next month and really trying to complete that study by the end of October and present all this information to our Park Commission so that we can then start talking about what does a sales tax extension look like and how do we move forward potentially with 1, 2, or all these projects over the next number of years. So certainly appreciate everybody's input. everybody's time this evening, and thank you for being in attendance. So with that, we'll conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.